And so it comes to this. Video game review time, everybody! You
asked for it!
No, not that yet! I already said when we're doing that again. No, today we're looking at Yooka-Laylee, the game that got voted on the most. I'm pretty excited, because this is a game that's meant to be a spiritual successor to one of my favorite N64 games ever. Yooka-Laylee was inspired by the likes of Banjo-Kazooie, a strange yet goofy game where nearly everything has eyes and are alive, and whose main plot is about as weird yet charming as everything else. It took the successful formula of 3D platforming that Mario 64 gave and enhanced it to where it could work for a 3D collectathon. And many of the same people involved with that game worked on Yooka-Laylee under their indie studio, Playtonic. The project was first announced on September of 2012 before receiving a Kickstarter campaign a few years later, in which it received enough funding to achieve all of its stretch goals with just over 2 million euros, meaning it could show up on all the major home consoles at the time. The version we're looking at for this review is the Switch version, mainly because I could take it with me even after this review, but I also wanted to see how well it fared on the Switch since it was the last to be ported on, as originally it would have been on the Wii U before they changed to the newer system. We'll also go over a little more on some other aspects of the game, but for now, let's get started on actually playing the game. It opens at Hivory Towers, get it? Where we meet our main antagonist, Capital B, who looks like Gru if he got turned into a bee-man, and his assistant, Dr. Quack. I am not sure what his deal is. Well, I'm already liking this game's humor. That's definitely something a former Banjo developer would include in their game. B apparently runs some kind of evil business, and he's planning on stealing all the books in the world. My god, he's trying to make the planet dumber by stealing literature! Elsewhere, at what appears to be a shipwreck, we meet our main heroes of this game. Yooka, a chameleon who's fairly laid back and loves adventure, and Laylee, a snarky, wisecracking bat who often gets the both of them in trouble with her many zingers. Obviously, both were inspired mostly by, well, who else? In any case, Laylee's prophet book gets taken, but as it flies away, the pages from it start to spill out all over the place. So after giving pursuit, we learn that Capital B has it, and since he won't give it back, we have to go in and get it back by force. But it isn't so simple, as it seems the missing pages, aka Pagies, are what's needed to progress through B's factory of literature, and so the duo must do what they can to conquer the many obstacles that lie ahead, enter many literary worlds, and gather all the Pagies they need to right what's wrong? Now, plot-wise, it's about what you'd hope for a 3D platformer. And for a game based on old Rare games, it's silly enough where even having to get some magical book back can be enjoyable given the kind of journey you'll have. How that journey will be to you is where some of the criticisms people have with the game lie, but we'll address that later. Let's talk gameplay. You move about with the left control stick, while the right moves your camera a bit when able. At the start, you can jump with B, while you can attack with the Y button, and with A, you stick out your tongue? Well, actually, this tongue allows you to snag butterflies that restore your health by eating them, though touching them directly can restore your power meter, which is used for your special moves. Said moves come from a pants-wearing snake named Trouser, who's also full of witty lines. You learn the moves by giving him quills, but only while you're inside one of the 5 worlds that this game has to offer. He does occasionally give you a free move, but only after doing enough inside them that you're able to progress to the next major area in the game. For much like Banjo-Kazooie, you explore a hub world with areas that are slightly themed after the world you're about to enter, which take the form of grand tomes. By using the power of the Pages, you can open them up and enter. From there, it's like getting hit with nostalgia. Each world is huge, with visuals that are rather nice to look at and environments that are unique in design. The music in this game is also fairly good, and often reflective of the worlds you visit. They were mainly composed by Grant Kirkhope, who recently had a hand in the surprisingly awesome Mario & Rabbids Kingdom Battle game, David Wise, who had a hand in composing Snake Pass, and Steve Berg, who performed for Star Fox Adventures and sound design for Perfect Dark Zero. Just about every track of this game is relaxing and enjoyable to listen to, though the amount present and how they get used is something else to be said. Moving forward, the object of this world is simple. Get all the collectibles you can find so you can progress further. You need Pages to open worlds, quills to learn new moves, molecules to transform, health extenders, self-explanatory, same with power extenders too, and play coins, which let you play that world's arcade machine hosted by some polygonal dinosaur named Rextro. Everything is tied to the same goal, but how you approach it is half the fun. Each world only has 25 Pages to get. However, you may notice that after spending a lot of time in that world, you find yourself running out of things to get. But not to worry. By spending some Pages on that same tome, you can expand it just once, and more things get added. More areas to explore, which means more collectibles. Naturally, the areas are designed to work with whatever new abilities there is to be had. So after gathering enough quills, you go see Trouser, who gives you a list of moves you can buy from him, and even if you already bought them, you can get a more detailed description of what each one does. The pause menu does at least have an easy to understand section, where it pretty much shows you with pictures. Among the moves you learn, there's Reptile Roll, that's similar to Kazooie's Talon Trot, in which you can move on even slippery surfaces, Slurp Shot, where after eating berries you can shoot them out with Y, and depending on what you ate, you get a different effect, Sonar Shot, which allows you to stun enemies and activate certain objects, and many, many more. Most of them are pretty cool, like later you learn Slurp State, where you can eat fire from braziers that make you immune to it, or how eating honey can make you be able to walk on surfaces that not even Reptile Roll can help you with. Just different things like that. But then there are some that take getting used to and yet still can give you some trouble. Reptile Roll in particular is one that I hoped would retain the same kind of tight movement that Talon Trot had, where you can turn easily just as you could with Banjo's run cycle. But because the two can't quite turn on a dime, it makes rolling pretty dangerous in areas that require you to make tight turns, or worse, jump. One example where needing to have a good grasp of the move is when you race Nimble, a talking cloud that offers you a Pagie if you beat her in a race. Because the ability can drain your power meter quickly, you would need to run into butterflies often to restore it. But sometimes you could miss them and you have no choice but to persevere and hope you find the next butterfly soon or else. Not every minigame in this game has a retry option, like one minigame in particular, so sometimes you have no choice but to wait it out until it's over, which can be a problem in later worlds. The only other move that kind of felt odd was Lizard Lash, which let you grab onto certain blocks to pull you forward, or even pull blocks to you. But it only works if it's in view of your camera, and you're not falling fast, because otherwise, nothing will happen at all. You just get the weird Yooka animation. But yeah, one of the things that can turn people away from a collectathon can be the mini-games, since some can leave you frustrated with how they expect you to accomplish something, but it's also more to do with what you have to do in getting certain pages. Some require you to solve some kind of environmental puzzle before they can be freed from their cages. Others have you go through sections that are sometimes longer than they should be, in one false move and you start back from where you entered. At least this game doesn't have lives or continues to worry about, but even still, dying in this game can be irritating when you feel like you've gotten close, screw up, and you start all over. Granted, this is a game where it helps to progress further and then come back when you have the right move to continue in older worlds. That's something that was common in most rare games that involved exploration. You're not expected to get everything at once, but even then you can't help but try. But then there are events that pretty much demand you be good at them and try until you succeed, regardless of what moves you have. And that couldn't be more true than with the Cardos mini-games. Basically, you ride Cardos on a mine track that spawns out of nowhere, and the goal is to collect a certain amount of gems before you get to the end. Sounds simple, and the controls seem simple enough after getting used to them, but it's hard to gauge when you have to jump, when to brake, or when to boost. I could never quite get the hang of getting the gold gems, and I feel like I end up jumping at the wrong time, so I end up on another track or something, thereby missing a bunch of gems. The cannon requires you to be right in the path of whatever you're shooting at, as it just goes in a straight line, sometimes at an angle if you were going at it. Honestly, the minecart sections in Donkey Kong 64 were a lot better handled in that you mostly had to avoid enemy attack and certain hazards. It just seems easier to control and the music can make it seem more intense. Here, the cart music just feels about the same as the other tracks. If anything, I think most of the soundtrack is relaxing and chill, while saving the high stakes / adrenaline inducing ones for the boss fights. I died so many times on certain cart levels that it just seems unfair at times, though they did at least shake it up by having a boss fight take place on it during the fourth world. But overall, if there was one thing about this game that I would say I disliked heavily about, it's this. There are plenty of other problems I could get around with that I'll go over soon enough. But man, to hell with Cardos! The enemy variety is quite alright, though they tend to reskin the corplets a lot despite sharing the same behavior patterns. Even while some have slightly different models, they use the same animations and attacks, and can take 1 or 2 hits from your tail depending on if they're wearing a hat or not. There's drones that shoot needles at you and can be hard to knock out of the air, even when you stun them with your sonar. There is one other enemy in particular I wanted to talk about, the Corplet Punisher, but for whatever reason, I don't seem to have any footage of it anywhere. Let's just say, they hit hard and are invincible whenever they make an attack, and they take a lot of hits, so beware. Really, the amount of enemies that there are can be numerous, but beating on these enemies can be tedious. They can also be annoying to deal with when trying to go through sections that take a while to get through while getting pages, and can definitely get in your way when it comes to platforming since you don't get that good a view when making them. And if you get knocked onto a slippery slope, you have no way to respond. You're sliding all the way down. More or less, the enemies and how you deal with them can be troublesome. The only enemies that I found fun to fight are the bosses. Well, half of them. The first boss is alright, though it kinda crosses into being irritating. But that, along with Breeze Block and Planette, the latter being my absolute favorite, were well balanced and manageable enough to where I had fun fighting them. But then you have Inept, who's a real pain in the ass since he's part of the minecart level in World 4. Also, in between 3 major sections of Ivory Towers, there's Dr. Quack's Quickfire Quiz, where you have to answer questions in the same manner as the quiz sections of Banjo-Kazooie and Tooie. Though here you just try to reach the end, which have 10 spaces. But you can save time by getting the answers quick enough to count as 2 right. It's alright, they're based on whatever worlds you visited, even if half the time I just make wild guesses. But it doesn't have quite the same feel as in the older games, partially because, well, there's not much stake in these ones. At least in Banjo-Kazooie, you had an entire board to walk on, and you can take any path you want, and Tooie had you competing against 2 witches in a game show. Now, while the world design is nice to look at times I feel like they're too big. This is another thing that can be bothersome to people and collectathons, in that they're so big you have trouble finding everything or figuring out what to do. Even after you get the ability to fly, which really helps in getting the remaining Pagies, it feels like you can't find the hidden passages or areas that might house something you missed. Compared to either Banjo 64 game, the levels feel a bit too vast and empty where you'd think they might have something, but they don't. Furthermore, there are these Ghost Riders, who like Jinjos have to be found in certain spots on the map, but each one has a certain condition to collecting them, like feeding them berries, catching them while invisible, beating them up when they try to attack you, or just touching them after finding them, though one likes to run away a lot. But again, because of how they work and where they are hidden, you might end up looking in places you've been to already and find yourself getting lost. There's not a whole lot to go on, and it can feel discouraging at times. Not helped either that the actual characters who show up in these levels aren't always that interesting. Sure, you have Dr. Puzz, who can transform you into different things, whose features vary, but some, like the helicopter, I remember having fun, and the ship having 3 different attacks is pretty cool. Clara Lost, get it, who tends to find herself in different situations, some more dangerous than others, and even a cameo from Shovel Knight. But then you have, like, the shopping carts that share the same body but with some minor additions. Same with the Casino Bandits, the Snowmen, and the Blathivians. It kinda takes up the character quota that could be used for other original characters. Each world in the Banjo games tended to have at least one original character tied to that world, while only reusing those with utility purposes like Mumbo or Humbo. But those games had about 9 worlds to visit. It would make sense to space them out while adding to the large roster of unique characters. But here, besides Puzz, it seems like we see Cardos a lot, then have a lot of the reskinned civilians, and then only having a few unique quest characters. I don't know, it just seems like the quantity was lacking here, though I apparently haven't seen all of them. Like Shell, the Space Witch. Like, okay, the game at least has me want to try to 100% it, but it's hard to be motivated sometimes. To be honest, this game does contain some of the same essence that the old Rare games had, where despite the large checklist of things to collect and what it takes to get them, it can be fun to get them because of what you did. They would challenge your platforming skills while providing some fun characters and dialogue. There is genuine effort in this game, as well as good writing to be had. But to really get my overall feelings, we need to go over the ending. After you've collected 100 Pagies, you can go inside this elevator that takes you to Capital B's office. There, he tells you about how he plans to rewrite the universe through the power of the one book. So, time to kick his ass before he can do so. Like with Gruntilda, the fight is pretty long and with many phases. The first 2 are easy. Use Sonar Explosion to knock away the bees, then you can attack him so you can ground pound him after. And then in phase 2, you have to And then in phase 2, you have to grab ice berries and just leap/hover to avoid his explosives and shoot him multiple times. Over time, these get so easy to figure out, you can speed your way through them. Phase 3 is where things start getting difficult, as you have to avoid him pounding you and causing shockwaves, soon even destroying platforms and using more bees. At least the bees don't attack immediately after he gets stuck, so you can land and blow the bees away before attacking him again. Where the fight gets difficult is in the final phase, when he starts shooting homing stingers at you, which you have to lure them into him, followed up by needing to do it while flying. And believe me, dodging the stingers on the ground was hard enough. Imagine trying to do it in the air. But once he's done, you get exposition that appears to be setting up for a sequel. Before... Hooray! Anticlimax! At least the cannon got to save the day. They even throw a party to congratulate him. What a hero. And that's pretty much it as far as the main game is concerned. There are a few secrets to be had, like these skulls that are like pirate treasure, that exist in each world. Plus the prospect of DLC that was funded, though so far nothing has come of it. And whatever else I might have missed during my initial playthrough. So, the best way I can describe this game is like how I feel for Yoshi's Island DS. I like it, but feel a bit underwhelmed compared to what it was trying to live up to. It has some good elements to it, like, again, the music is pretty good, there's some really funny dialogue present, and it has a bit of the same surrealness that older Rare games had. But I think they clung too hard to the old Banjo games that they weren't quite able to modernize an old genre like they wanted to. It feels like they were halfway there, but came up short in the way of execution. Like it could very well have been a straight up remake of Banjo-Kazooie instead of being like a clone or spin-off. The challenges brought on by the worlds can be understandably frustrating, as it's not something everyone is accustomed to, and will not age well. Hell, I think Donkey Kong 64 aged better than it, and that game required you to 100% it. Plus, if anything, the mini-games and whatever it is you fought were a lot more satisfying and honestly a bit more fun than this game. When the game was finally released for the first time, it received mostly mixed reviews because of some of these reasons. Though over time, the developers would improve the quality of the game by the time it came out on the Switch. Even though the Switch port seems to suffer from long load times, everything else functions just as it was intended. I'm hoping at some point they do continue supporting the game or even consider making a sequel. I'd like to know what else can happen in the world of Yooka-Laylee and what improvements can be made. If you love old retro games, this one can provide you with a similar sense of play style, just updated, then I'd recommend getting this. It's far from being a bad game, and unlike Mighty No. 9, it at least lives up to taking after nostalgia. Just adjust your expectations accordingly. I'm the Media Hunter. Media's my prey, and reviewing them my way.